So I'm John Spaid. I work at American Fidelity, and I'm in our new cloud area. I'm the cloud enterprise architect. And the way I've been working with DevOps lately is we're building a lot of infrastructure out and all kinds of stuff that's pretty normal DevOps scenarios. But this was a scenario that came up that I thought was, it's not unique, but it's a problem that DevOps really isn't always addressed to solve. And that is the largest time suck that I have as an architect, and that's going over technical policy, procedure, and standards with non-technical people who have nothing to do with the actual implementation of any of the technology. And a major problem that comes up all the time is, well, when was that written? Who wrote that? Why did we do it that way? And all that stuff. And you guys, probably as better developers than me, because my background is in infrastructure and servers and stuff, know that, I mean, Git has everything you need to be able to blame whoever you need to for whoever did that policy or procedure. So that was when I started messing with that problem with the new organization that I'm building out. Git was kind of the first thing, and I was like, well, I could build my policy and procedure in there in text files, and then we'd always know who did what and when and why if we had our commit logs and everything. So, but we want to make that pretty too, because the non-technical people don't just want you to send them a whole bunch of text files. So I kind of took a cue from Microsoft's new documentation system at docs.microsoft.com. They're using DocFX to just build a static site out of Markdown and some configuration. So I really only started this a couple weeks ago, and I've spent maybe an hour on it, and so I'm not fully versed in how DocFX works yet. And it has a lot of features that I am not using, from what I understand, because I'm not writing code, right? I'm just writing a documentation site. But it's designed to dump out documentation from your code, so that might be more useful for somebody who actually writes code and not me. What I've got set up is a project in Azure DevOps, formerly VSTS, with continuous integration, continuous deployment set up to go out to an app service that I'm running. And that app service is actually also built off a different project that has a CI/CD pipeline, and it's just not interesting because all it does is build the app service and sit there. But it could easily become part of this project with a different pipeline. So let me go through what I've got here. Basically, this is just a clone of the DocFX seed files off GitHub. So it just builds you a quick basic site. And then if you do a little bit of reading on DocFX and everything, you can see your table of contents. YAML down here does the header, and then each of these folders that you create, when you link to them, you can go add standards and stuff like that. So I've got my table of contents for the side here. And then these are the standard examples that I have right now. So when I do this, it works with VS Code and everything else. I can just clone the repository locally and make the changes requested by whatever the output of our meetings are, where we're defining these standards. And I can link back to specific people, and it also ensures that nobody goes in here who doesn't really know what they're doing, because you at least have to know a little bit about Git to go in there and edit files and do a commit. So it assures me that none of my non-technical people are going to go in there and mess with my standards and make them completely crazy. So just a couple example things in here, and you get a nice preview of the Markdown here. But really, what happens when I change one of these, for example, I'm just working on my device security standards, so I can go in here and say, sorry, I have a bum finger, so I'm typing all wrong constantly today. So as soon as I do that commit, and I could write in comments about the meeting here, of course, or anything else, but I at least get the default of what changed, right? So at a minimum, by default, it's going to throw something that lets me know what file was changed during that commit, even if people aren't doing a good job on their comments. And I can always use blame to go back and look at exactly what they're doing. And then I've got my two pipelines. So the build pipeline, while that runs, I'll show you how it works. It's a very simple pipeline in this scenario because I just have it set up for CI builds. As soon as there's a commit to master, it builds. But you could make it much more robust and have some testing and even some manual approvals and stuff in the workflow before it gets deployed. So there's a native job here that you can add for the DocFX documentation. You have to add that from the marketplace in Azure DevOps. And that just takes all those files, wraps them up, generates the static output, and then we just dump them and drop them in that zip file right there. And then that picks up into my release build, or my release pipeline, and automatically deploys. So as soon as that build is finished, it'll pick up and deploy here in a minute. If you haven't played with VSTS or anything much, you can actually go in, I missed it. You can go in and see the console output as it goes. So you can actually go in and see this live as it's going. So my release automatically picks up and starts to deploy to that site. And then the site is here basically, so we should have an updated version here in just a second. So again, you could add in this release pipeline, you'd probably want an approval step where you have maybe a formal meeting once a month to go over policy and procedure changes, and you can go through them quickly in this application so that you don't have to prepare beforehand or anything like that. You've got all your commits, you've got it basically just like a code review, but you just run it for the non-technical people that are approving that kind of thing, and then they see it. And at the end of it, you could have a sign-off or a stage where you have all those approvals occur. And all this is secured and authenticated through my Azure AD, but you use whatever identity provider you have set up for that kind of thing. And you can pull stuff from GitHub too. You don't have to use the Git repository in Azure DevOps necessarily. And then all my documentation is immediately up to date. And one of the favorite things that a lot of the non-technical folks say is like the format is consistent. So if you're using like a big pile of Word documents in a SharePoint library, which was our old system, everybody's Word document's a little different. Like one guy decided he liked tables, so he put tables in his. The other guy didn't like the tables and started using like the native formatting in the styles at the top of the Word document. So he used that, and it just gets all screwy. Everybody has different versions of the template. There's no real official repository, and this way, the documentation is built consistently every time. Nobody has their own thing. All you have to do is give them like a little cheat sheet on Markdown if they want to even write anything. And half the time, what I'm really getting is for technical people who are writing these, like the standard level stuff, they just look at a Markdown cheat sheet and write it and commit and have no problem adapting to that. Your infrastructure guys, I assume most of you are developers because we've talked about more developer things than infrastructure things. The infrastructure guys like me don't have a real hard time learning how to do a quick git commit and write in Markdown. It's not a big deal. And then for your administrators and like executives, they're just going to email stuff to those guys anyway. So that's a lot of the ways this gets updated is they just change it in the policy, and then they can write comments in that don't show up in the final, just site generation, but you can actually write, like this came from CIO so-and-so, and it'll be in the Markdown as a comment, so it's not in the final site, but you'll remember why that was there if it's something that sounds a little off or, like that. So, any questions? All right. Thank you, guys.